In view of what is happening, I think Kenya need basically to denounce the pact.
Denounce the pact, yes.
Yeah, we need to somehow make a statement in one way or another and denounce that pact between us and Ethiopia, because we are actually the next. Mm-hmm. Remember, the long game of Abiy is to create an Oromia, which stretches from Ethiopia to the Tana River, where the Oromo-speaking people are. And that essentially means that the going to Somalia is just an excuse. The real target is here because the port of Lamu will be in Ethiopia from the look of things, if we go by that matrix. And you cannot underrate Abiy. He's a person who is a long-term thinker. He has waged 3 wars in 5 years and is now stalking the third and the fourth, the fourth and the fifth. And the real target is actually Assad in the Red Sea and Ramu in the Indian Ocean. And that makes the empire what they used to call the Empire of Kush. That's what he's trying to create. The Kush Empire.
The Kush Empire.
Basically, Shiitic Empire.
Thank you.
And therefore, I think he's really making the Horn the most unstable region in the world in the coming years.
Right. Let's just begin with the latest development with this. Their vested interests, as we can see. Yusuf Hassan.
Well, I'll say that what has happened since the 1st of January, when Ethiopia started testing the ground by signing a memorandum of understanding with the northern region of Somalia, which is known as Somaliland, has sparked a diplomatic role. And what has come out of this, Ethiopia is the headquarters of the African Union. It is also a founder member of IGAD. And it has always placed an emphasis on the rules-based system. Territorial integrity, sovereignty has been its hallmark. And to a certain extent, Ethiopia has benefited from that because it is a country that has been facing successionism. Eritrea split. The Somali region of Ethiopia has been a center of war for many years. So the role has now been switched in the sense that it is Ethiopia that has been accused of having an interest in grabbing another state's territory, and is on the defensive diplomatically, because Somalia, which is in 1977 went to war with Ethiopia over the Ogaden, was an isolated country because the rest of the world thought that they were violating the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ethiopia. But now the shoes is on the other side. Ethiopia has been accused of exactly the same thing that it's been fighting all of these years, and it is finding itself diplomatically isolated. It's not just Egypt. The United States, China, the European Union, the African Union, the Arab League. Apart from one major power, Russia is the only country that has not publicly pronounced on the dispute. But every other power and every other international and regional organization has cautioned Ethiopia to say that this is not the right thing to do. So I think in that sense, it appears as if Ethiopia may have to rethink because it is decision to have access to the sea and also to have a naval base in addition to that, because people are asking, it's okay for a landlocked country to seek an outlet to the sea through bilateral relationships with the neighboring countries, Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia. But it is another thing when you aspire to want to take a territory and impose your own naval base, your own military power, project your own military power. And every country in the world, in the region, that has special relationship with Ethiopia, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, every country has come out against that, including much of the African continent. So Somalia is winning the diplomatic war, and Ethiopia is finding itself in isolation, which has not usually been the case. So I think maybe Ethiopia needs to rethink about its decision to want to go that way in developing and getting access to the sea.
How will this really scupper the process of Ethiopia also with its endeavor to join the East African community, given that frosty relationship that is happening right now? Do you think this will act as an impediment moving forward, and they will lean more on the BRICS side, as they've right now been enrolled, at least in the BRICS, or are they in the process? The last time I checked, I think they were in the process of joining the BRICS, or they've already been enrolled?
Ethiopia has joined the BRICS.
It's joined finally, yes.
So it's part of the BRICS together with Egypt. Those are the two African countries that have joined South Africa, making the three African countries in the BRICS. So that die is cast. I mean, it's finished. There's a done deal. Now, the East African community, I don't think Ethiopia has been eager to join the East African community the way Somalia had. If it was, Somalia would have joined the East African community a long time ago. So it want to be an independent power in the Horn, but with close relationship with possibly the East African community and so on. But in its own economics, it doesn't want to open up for either the East African community or its members. It runs a very closed economy, to the best of my knowledge. And I'm talking about living there for over 5 years as a resident of Ethiopia. Now, I think what needs to be put in very, very good context is why this dispute. Now, Ethiopia has access to more than 10 ports in Eastern Africa, in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And you can count them. It has access to Djibouti, where it has even built a 720-kilometer speed railway, which is the only electric railway, I think, in Africa of that length. Meaning it has invested heavily to access the port. And there is no issue about its access to the port of Djibouti. That's not in question. 2, it has access to the port of Beira and Hargeisa. In fact, in Beira it has, Barbera? In Barbera, it has 30% share.
19%.
19% of the shares. I think it was negotiating for that. Now it has 19% of the shares, meaning it can access. It has access to a port in Puntland at the far end. It has access to a port in every of the 6 Somali regional states.
And Port Sudan.
Then it has access to Port Sudan. In Kenya, it has access to Ramu as part of an agreement that is already done and investment done. So the problem with Ethiopia, it has nothing to do with access to the sea. It has everything to do with the intention or the ambition to build a the largest naval power in the Horn. And you cannot have a navy if you don't have access to the sea. And no country will allow you to use its port for its naval purposes. So that is the dilemma that catches Prime Minister Abiy. He needs a navy, and no country can allow. The last time Ethiopia had a navy was in Asab, which is in Asimala. So that is the context in which in November last year, Abiy announced with no contradiction that Ethiopia will have a port, access to the sea. They're not talking about having access to the port where you can do your business. Access to the sea peacefully or by war. That he made very, very clear. Now, when you look at the part of Somalia he has annexed, it is not Barbera. It is actually a corridor between Djibouti and itself, which is 20 kilometers, which is the shortest distance from Ethiopia to the sea. It is about 80 kilometers. From the Ethiopian border, the tip, when you look at the Ogaden region, that tip to the Red Sea. And that area is very strategic because it is the entry point to the Red Sea. So it means that the moment Ethiopia builds its naval base there, it will control and determine who enters and who doesn't enter the Gulf of Aden into the Red Sea. And that is what has set feelers in Egypt. Egypt is cornered twice. You've built the Millennium Dam, which is basically, according to them, strangulating the Nile waters. So Ethiopia controlled the Nile waters. Now you want to control the Red Sea waters. And that is what has pushed Egypt, Al-Sisi, into Somalia. And the point is, diplomatically, Ethiopia is on the long side of things. Now, what has iked Somalia as a government and as a society is the fact that it has signed a deal with a breakaway part of Somalia, and in exchange for literally supporting that region to break away, it is basically recognizing Somaliland as a sovereign state. Okay. That is why everything is wrong with this deal. And that's why Ethiopia is not getting any support from anywhere, because you support the breaking away of another country, a member country, and then you ride on that to occupy aggressively a land that is owned by another society.
Thank you.
And that is not good.
Yeah. Dr. Kanenja.
Yeah, of course, this current action, while perhaps they may be informed by calculations of the administration in Addis Ababa, I think the kind of reaction that it has attracted probably was not exactly expected from Addis Ababa. And that is regionally, while the region may not directly or publicly condemn Addis Ababa, the East African community, with the recent admission of Somalia, it finds itself in a place that is very difficult not to be able to side with Somalia, because they didn't enter into an agreement with Somalia that was half. They entered into an agreement with Somalia that was full, and so they're admitting Somalia as a whole. So within East Africa, it's going to be very difficult to find those who are going to support secessionism of Hargeisa, despite the fact that these countries have some kind of engagement with Hargeisa. Kenya has a liaison office in Hargeisa and has had, have a presence for some time. Ethiopia has, as well as a number of countries on the continent. But secondly, it also complicates the situation in terms of security architecture within the region, and especially when discussing the post-ATMI Somalia. We know that Addis Ababa has played a fundamental role, has been part of those countries that have been contributed in terms of maintaining security within Ethiopia under the framework, or within Somalia. And so the current tensions, I think, complicates the post-ATMIS in Somalia, but also fuels tensions that are not going to contribute to pacifying the region, considering what is happening in Sudan. Considering that South Sudan, despite the relative peace we're seeing, the revitalized agreement has never really been completed in terms of being implemented. And Ethiopia itself is facing some nationalist or subnational resistance, especially from the Amhara region. And so it doesn't exactly bode well for 2024 for the region. But what we hope is there's going to be recognition that perhaps they need to take back. Good thing is the MOU is not exactly legally binding. And so while it suggests that Ethiopia may recognize Somaliland, it did not recognize it outrightly. And so perhaps we can use this kind of ambiguity to go back to the negotiating table and try to pacify the region, because if we don't and start taking this matter seriously, then we may be going down a very dangerous path, considering the geopolitics of the region and how important the Horn of Africa is, not just to the Gulf countries, but also the rest of the world. This region may become very dirty very quickly if we do not move with speed to arrest it.
Right. Prof. Munene, so this is not all about economic constraints, with also their dollar really contracting. They don't have, is it the dir? What is the name of the dollar?
Beer.
The beer right now. It is about, as you say, the Horn of Africa supremacy that Ethiopia wants to impose.
Well, see, Ethiopia is very unfortunate, and Abiy is wrong in every way. But he's not the first to have this kind of thing. He thinks he's a reincarnated Menelik II. And Menelik had these dreams of going all the way to the sea. Only that he was taught by the British, the Italians, and the French, who created the borders, the Ethiopian borders. So that dream of going to the sea was curtailed by the European colonialism in this area. Even Haile Selassie had the same dream. And what you have, Abiy is now thinking that he can do it. And yes, he's made pronouncement that he's even willing to fight, to go to war, to have that. And the problem for him is that nobody is for him in this. There's also the change of attitude that has occurred in Somalia. Somalia is no longer talking about irredentism. So abandon that. So now have Ethiopia is the one doing it. Say now we need this, so you go there. So for Egypt to say we are not with you, of course Egypt has a good reason to like to build upon Ethiopia because of the dam. And it needs a good excuse. So if this happens, and even the Turks who are operating in Somalia, they have also said no. And the Americans have said no. So Ethiopia is isolated because it's going the wrong direction. And it wants to control a particular part of the sea. And in controlling that particular part of the sea, it can have the navy that it wants, and build up, and maybe flex its muscles. Along the way, it has quarreled with almost everybody. I think a few years ago, they were ganging up. There was a gang up, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. They looked like the three musketeers. And who was the target at the time? Kenya. And Kenya was very jittery. What's going on here? When is it Famajo and Afowaki and Abiy, and they looked as if they were ganging up against Kenya. And behind that thing was Ethiopia's desire to control some parts of the sea. So it's made a mistake, total mistake. It is alone. And the Europeans who gave him a Nobel, I think, have been regretting they made a mistake. Because he's used that as if it's a leverage to do whatever he wants. So he's not going anywhere. Ethiopia and Kenya have defense understanding, ranging back into the 60s. That understanding is not a license for Ethiopia to do what it is. And I think in this case, Kenya, I think would stand well and say, no, that one, no. We can't agree to that. So it is unfortunate for Abiy. He's discredited himself. He is a problem. And maybe somebody should remind him, be careful. You are alone here.
You're overambitious.
You're overambitious. Yes.
All right. Let's get our closing remarks and talking about that particular defense agreement with Ethiopia that hacks back into the 60s. Do you think, as we're winding up just briefly, maybe you as a departmental committee on foreign relations, security and diplomacy, we need to relook at that?
No, I think that agreement was determined by the facts on the ground at that time. You know that Kenya was a newly independent country. It was facing a rebellion in its northern region, supported by Somalia. And Ethiopia was a major regional power. And it was a natural, rational decision for any country to make. But we also may enter an agreement with Somalia on issues of mutual interest.
But going through the streams of time, I think it has been overtaken by events.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so
now Somalia is now part of the East African community.
That's what I'm saying. That we need to look at that particular agreement. Maybe we should consider it. I don't know.
But most agreements they have their relevancy at one time, and then eventually they become irrelevant and people move on. So I don't think there's any need to sort of revisit it. It's just would become useful when
somebody might whip it as like, hey, do you remember this agreement? So we need maybe to completely obliterate it.
But if you look at that agreement was entirely for Kenya to seek support from a more powerful neighbor if it was threatened.
Okay.
It was never a situation where Kenya would be required to go to the rescue of the other party.
Thank you.